The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that's not quiet, but charged. Reporters lined every wall. Spectators held their breath. Security stood tighter than usual. And at the defense table, Kash Patel sat upright, hands clasped, suit perfectly pressed. It was the final day of a 3-week federal hearing that had gripped the nation. Patel, former chief of staff at the Pentagon and longtime national security official, stood accused of misuse of classified information after disclosing declassified documents in a whistleblower interview. The case had divided America. To some, he was a hero. To others, a rogue agent. But no one, not one person, could deny what was about to happen in the next hour would be historic. The judge, a towering figure named Eleanor Mercer, was known for her composure and her rulings that rarely made headlines. But today she looked at Patel with an expression the cameras couldn't quite capture, something between tension and expectation. "Mr. Patel," she said, "before I issue final judgment, you may address this court one last time. Do you wish to speak?" The room leaned forward, every phone, every lens, every ear. Kash stood. He looked down for a moment, thumbed the edge of his cufflink, and then raised his eyes. "I have only one thing to say," he said, "but you'll want to hear it all the way to the last sentence." You could feel it, the atmosphere crackling. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to fold. He was going to tell the truth, and his truth was going to hit harder than any ruling ever could. Kash Patel took a deep breath, then stepped toward the podium, slowly, deliberately, as if each footfall was a statement. He didn't glance at the cameras. He didn't look at the prosecution. He locked eyes with the judge. "Your Honor, I won't ask for mercy. I won't plead for understanding, because I didn't come here to defend myself. I came here to defend something much older and far more powerful than me." The room didn't stir. It froze. "I came here to defend the truth." He placed a folded paper on the podium, but didn't open it. "They said I mishandled classified information. What I did was bring forward documents already declassified, buried, ignored, but real." He turned slightly, addressing the court, and beyond that, the nation. The truth wasn't the crime, it was the target. From the gallery, one journalist lowered his pen and just listened. Kash continued, "There's something broken in this process when revealing a lie becomes more dangerous than telling it. When a courtroom designed for justice becomes a stage for reputation management. And when telling the people what their government is doing behind closed doors gets you a summons instead of a salute." Judge Mercer didn't interrupt. She didn't have to. This wasn't just testimony. It was a reckoning. "What I revealed," Kash said, "was inconvenient. That's what made it valuable." He picked up the folded page, now trembling slightly. "This isn't just my story. It's your story, too. Because if the truth can be punished when it's politically unapproved, then tomorrow the facts won't belong to anyone." The courtroom stayed silent, but across the country the feed had already begun to trend. Kash Patel, final words, truth on trial. Kash Patel unfolded the page. Not to read it, but to hold it. "This is a transcript excerpt from a meeting that took place 17 months ago inside a SIF between myself and 2 senior intelligence officials." He turned it toward the judge. "The original transcript is classified, but the identities of those present are not." Now the courtroom shifted. The prosecution stiffened. Phones in the gallery lit up like fireflies, ready to catch the next words. Kash continued, "During that meeting, I was instructed to compile a timeline of internal policy failures related to foreign surveillance programs. When I asked what level of transparency we owed the public, one official said, and I quote, 'We'll worry about optics once the media moves on.'" He paused. "And that official was," he looked down for just a second, "Jake Sullivan." The air was sucked from the room. Someone in the gallery audibly whispered, "No way." Another reporter dropped their pen. Jake Sullivan, the current national security advisor to the president. The judge's eyes widened. Slightly, but enough. Kash pressed on. "The reason this case exists is because I didn't wait for the media to move on. I gave the public what they were never meant to see. Not to cause chaos, but to end secrecy. Not to burn bridges, but to make sure there were no back doors into the truth." The prosecution rose, furious. "Your Honor, we object to." "Sit down," Mercer said coldly. "If Mr. Patel is naming officials tied to suppression, I want to hear every one." And with that, the cameras, though officially barred, couldn't stop what was already happening online. Clips from court sketch artists, lip readers, whispered notes, all confirmed what was just said. He named Sullivan. Outside, the crowd surged. Inside, the courtroom was no longer a trial. It was a fire. The moment Kash Patel uttered the name Jake Sullivan, the entire courtroom spun on its axis. But what came next? No one expected. A door creaked open in the back of the chamber. A man stepped in, tall, greying, dressed in civilian clothes but moving like military. The bailiff approached, whispering urgently. The judge leaned forward, clearly surprised, then nodded. Let him speak. The man walked to the witness stand without hesitation. He held a sealed envelope in one hand, an official clearance badge in the other. Name? The judge asked. Colonel Michael R. Davis, retired, former Director of Special Programs, Office of the DNI. What brings you here, Colonel? He looked directly at Kash, then spoke to the room. I came because the truth walked in, and it deserves backup. Gasps in the gallery. Davis placed the envelope on the table. This is a letter written 6 months ago from inside the office of the Director of National Intelligence. It confirms that Mr. Patel's actions were based on approved declassification procedures, and that efforts were made to intentionally bury those clearances once media inquiries began. He paused, and it names names. Judge Mercer opened the envelope herself. She read silently for 30 seconds, then blinked once. This document references Jake Sullivan, a former deputy DNI analyst and a senior White House official, also marked as present during a policy suppression directive. The prosecution stammered. Objection. This is inadmissible hearsay, Davis cut in. You want admissibility? I'll testify under oath in public and on record. Today, now. Kash remained silent, calm, watching. He didn't need to say another word, because now he had a witness, and more importantly, he had validation. Outside the courthouse, the crowd tripled. Cable news anchors scrambled, aerial cameras circled overhead, hashtags exploded. Colonel speaks, the letter, Patel was right. Inside, Judge Mercer turned to the prosecution. Do you wish to cross-examine Colonel Davis? Dead silence, because they knew any question they asked would only make things worse. The courthouse was no longer just a building. It was the eye of a national storm. By mid-afternoon, 3 major networks had cut live to the scene. Journalists were broadcasting from the steps. Protesters waved flags, some in support of Kash Patel, others demanding answers from the intelligence community. But the real moment was still unfolding inside. Judge Mercer sat motionless, reading the letter from Colonel Davis again, this time more slowly. The room was dead quiet. Finally, she placed the pages down and spoke. This court has reviewed first-hand documentation, verified by a former senior intelligence official, that supports Mr. Patel's claim of pre-cleared declassification authority. She turned slightly toward the prosecution table. That means this court is no longer in denial. It is in possession of proof. The lead prosecutor stood up, flustered. Your Honor, we were never informed of this letter. No, Mercer replied sharply. You were too busy informing the press of your narrative to check the facts. You could feel it. The shift. The judge's tone had changed. She wasn't managing a trial anymore. She was uncovering a setup. She looked directly at Kash. Mr. Patel, in light of new evidence, I'm placing this hearing under full review. All prior assumptions are vacated. That one line was all the world needed. All prior assumptions are vacated. Within minutes, every outlet ran the headline. Patel case implodes in real time. Judge turns on prosecutors after new evidence. Exoneration incoming. The White House responded late that night with a cautious press release. We trust the court system and the facts being presented. The administration has no comment on ongoing proceedings. But inside internal circles, the mood was frantic. One senior aide was overheard saying, We didn't lose the case, we lost the narrative. And all the while, Kash Patel said nothing, because he didn't need to. The truth was finally speaking, and it was louder than any closing argument. The courtroom was buzzing, not with noise, but with energy. Everyone sensed it. This wasn't about Kash Patel's freedom anymore. It was about the system's integrity, or lack of it. But just as the judge prepared to adjourn for the day, Kash did something unexpected. He stood calmly and addressed Judge Mercer. Your Honor, before this court breaks, I have one request. She raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. I want to speak. Not to the court, not to the press. I want to speak directly to the American people. On the record. The room froze. The judge hesitated. But then she nodded. "Mr. Patel, the floor is yours." He stepped forward slowly. There was no script, no binder this time, just his voice and the truth behind it. "I'm not standing here today because I broke a law. I'm standing here because I refused to break faith with the people who trusted me. They said what I shared endangered national security, but they never told you what that information revealed, because what it actually endangered was their narrative." He looked up, scanning the gallery, the reporters, and finally, straight into the camera. "If we're going to be a free country, then truth can't be treated like contraband. We don't work for secrecy. We work for citizens." Then came the part that would break the internet. To every American who's been told to stay quiet, to every whistleblower buried under legal threats, to every soldier, teacher, nurse, and student who's afraid to speak up, I'm still standing. And if you're watching this, you will be too. A silence followed. Then the room, against every courtroom rule, slowly began to applaud. One person, then 5. Then the entire gallery was on their feet. Judge Mercer didn't stop them. She just stared at Kash and nodded once. That clip would hit 12 million views by morning. Still standing, Kash Patel's speech, truth over silence. And then, like fuel on the fire, came the breaking news. A top DOJ official involved in launching the case had just been fired. By sunrise the next morning, the pressure on the Department of Justice was unbearable. Kash Patel's courtroom speech had gone viral across all platforms. Political commentators called it the most powerful public testimony since the Church Committee. Memes, T-shirts, and hashtags flooded timelines. College students played the speech on loop. Veterans posted it with captions like, "This is what courage looks like." But just as the public began demanding accountability, a bombshell report dropped from investigative journalist Alison Rudd at the Federal Ledger. Title: Leaked emails show DOJ coordinated talking points before Patel indictment. Rudd had obtained internal messages, time-stamped before the investigation had even begun, showing DOJ officials crafting statements about Kash Patel's reckless behavior months before any evidence was reviewed. One line burned like acid: "Once we get Patel boxed in, we can use the charges to control the public discourse around D-class leaks." Back in the courtroom, the prosecution knew their foundation was crumbling. Their only move left? A procedural stunt. They filed a motion to postpone closing statements, claiming new evidence needed additional review. The goal? Delay the fallout. But Judge Mercer wasn't having it. She scanned the motion, paused. "You had 18 months to prepare this case. And now that the facts don't match your narrative, you want more time?" She set the folder down firmly. Motion denied. Then Kash stood again. He turned to the prosecution, not with rage, but calm certainty. "You wanted to box me in, but you forgot something. I don't bring stories, I bring documents." He lifted a second folder, thin, labeled simply Appendix A. "This includes the official clearance timeline, metadata, and a signed summary from the Office of the Inspector General. It shows I followed protocol, step by step." The prosecutors didn't speak, because they had nothing left. The judge nodded slowly, as if realizing just how deep the manipulation ran. "We will move to final judgment tomorrow. And Mr. Patel, your request to deliver a closing statement is granted." The morning of final judgment, the courthouse was surrounded, not by riot police, not by protesters, but by citizens. Quiet, respectful, lined down the block, veterans in uniform, families with children, young students holding pocket constitutions, all there for one reason: to hear Kash Patel speak one last time. Inside, the air was different, heavier. As Judge Mercer gavelled the session into order, not a soul moved, no rustling of papers, no typing from reporters, just a suspended breath, the nation waiting to exhale. "Mr. Patel," she said, "you may proceed with your closing remarks." Kash stepped to the center of the courtroom. No podium, no notes, just him. "I was told I could speak freely, but what they really meant was speak safely. I was told I could reveal the truth, as long as it wasn't inconvenient. I was told I had clearance until I used it." He glanced around the courtroom, locking eyes with the lead prosecutor. "Let me be clear. I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came here to protect what's already under attack: truth, law, and the right of every citizen to question power." He turned to the judge. "This case was never about protecting secrets. It was about protecting control. Because if the public ever saw what I saw, they'd realize it's not chaos that threatens democracy, it's censorship dressed in protocol. Now his voice rose, not yelling but ringing like a bell. I was charged with telling the truth, and today I'm pleading guilty. The judge blinked. A few people gasped. Then Kash clarified. Sharp, deliberate. Guilty of telling the people what their government didn't want them to know. Guilty of trusting Americans more than bureaucrats. Guilty of believing freedom still matters. The gallery was motionless, jaws open, eyes wet. Cameras outside picked up a ripple across the crowd, phones raised, texts flying. He said he's guilty, and the room froze. Kash Patel stood silently for a moment after delivering what many thought was the final line of his speech. But it wasn't. Not yet. He scanned the room, the judge, the prosecutors, the press, the citizens. Then he said clearly and slowly, "You can sentence me if you want." He took a single step forward. "But if telling the truth is a crime now, then you'd better build a bigger courtroom." Silence. Then a collective intake of breath, the kind that always comes right before history changes. Judge Mercer didn't speak immediately. Even she looked moved, shaken perhaps, by the realization that this wasn't a man trying to save himself. This was a man reminding America of who it's supposed to be. Outside, the quote hit the internet in seconds. "You'd better build a bigger courtroom." It was on banners, signs, shirts, tattoos, TikToks. By noon, it was projected onto federal buildings in 5 states. By nightfall, it had been read aloud on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Back in the courtroom, the judge leaned forward. Her voice at last returned. "Mr. Patel, this court has reviewed new evidence, verified new testimony, and watched the nation respond to what began as a closed-door inquiry and has now become an open-book trial of our institutions." She paused, then continued. "This is not a day for punishment. This is a day for reckoning." Everyone leaned in. "Therefore, this court drops all charges against Mr. Kash Patel effective immediately." Gasps. Cheers. Reporters scrambling, but Judge Mercer raised a hand. "And further, I am issuing a formal request for a federal review of all cases related to classified transparency brought in the last 10 years. The courtroom erupted. Kash didn't cheer. He didn't even smile. He just nodded once. The trial was over. But what happened next proved it was more than just a legal battle. It was a national reset. Within 48 hours, news networks declared it the trial that restored trust. Law schools began teaching the Patel precedent in civil liberties courses. A bipartisan committee was formed to re-evaluate laws governing classified disclosures and whistleblower protections. And outside Washington, thousands marched, not in anger, but in purpose, holding signs that read, "Truth on trial." "You'd better build a bigger courtroom. Patel spoke for us." Kash Patel returned home quietly. No press tour, no book deal. He simply posted one message: not guilty, not afraid, not done. But in the Library of Congress, something new was quietly framed and placed beneath protective glass. A sketch. It showed Kash Patel standing at the center of the courtroom, head up, eyes forward, defiant but calm. Behind him, Judge Mercer, hand paused over her gavel. Below it, engraved in gold, "If telling the truth is a crime, then you'd better build a bigger courtroom." That same week, Kash received a handwritten letter from a teenager in Nebraska. "Dear Mr. Patel, I'm 15. I never cared about government stuff until I saw you speak. I thought courtrooms were places where people lost, but you showed me that sometimes truth wins. I want to be like that one day." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his old courtroom binder. And as the sun set that evening, one thing was clear. A nation had witnessed not just a verdict, but a victory for every voice that refuses to be silent.